This is the PTI Smarter Venues podcast.
So welcome along to this PTI Vodcast. I'm delighted to be joined here today by John Coombs, the co-founder and CEO at Rover. My name is Mike Bohndiek. I'm the CEO at PTI, and today we're going to be talking about the global app trends that we're seeing during the period of COVID, how that's going to influence the use of apps moving forward. So, John, thanks for joining us. Would you just give us a little bit of context and background to Rover itself and the platform?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here with you. Yeah, a little bit of background about both myself and Rover. We started about 6 years ago, and we initially started as a solution to a problem that wasn't sports specific. It was really looking at the mobile app ecosystem. You kind of see that a lot of content delivered through an app requires a lot of developer time and technical resources. So we built a solution that really empowered brands, marketers, and obviously sports clubs to create good fan content, good user content without the traditional sort of hurdles and resource requirements. We've been working in sport for over 5 years now. And have grown that business from, our first, National Hockey League hockey club to over, approaching 60, 70 teams and leagues, heavily in North America. We work with the majority of the NFL, but increasingly more globally. Really, at the end of the day, they're using our product to enhance their existing apps. We don't build apps, but that enhancement gives them new sponsorship opportunities and new ways to engage the fan, which, as we were talking about earlier, is especially prescient right now.
Yeah, so I guess during the COVID period, there's a lot of demand for digital. There's a lot of need for that form of engagement, and it's often said that the US market, the North American market, is sort of ahead of Europe and ahead of the world in terms of how it considers digital. With that being your home territory, how are you seeing that at the moment?
Yeah, I have to provide a bit of a shout out to counter that point because over the last few years I've had a good opportunity to spend a lot of time with European football clubs, both in broader Europe as well as in the UK, and I think that what I always bring back to North America is sort of the global mindset of so many clubs. This notion that I have my supporters, I have those who come to the game, but I might have 50 million fans in one, Asian country. And it's very much a global mindset when it approaches to sport, which I think traditionally North America has very much regionalized or at least, domestically looked at their sports base. That's certainly changing. And I think North America has a good deal to learn from how many, European and UK Premier League teams have kind of looked at the global nature of sport. One thing I do think that you see in North America, which again is especially relevant right now, is really an emphasis on the role of digital assets, digital inventory, and the investment, both in terms of staffing and prioritization, and in terms of investment in sort of building out the digital ecosystem. I think a lot of, certainly not all of them, but I think a lot of North American clubs, especially, we see it in the NFL and in other leagues, have made a concerted effort to say, we're basically building inventory. We're building a tech ecosystem that we can, use to engage our fans. And one of the things I see from some of the brightest minds in the business is viewing that as well through the context of how we often view like e-commerce or other tech business models, which is how do I look at that continuum of that fan, the lifetime value of that fan. When I look at that data, I can say, well, I know that, once they've done behavior A, B, and C, we know the likelihood of them going to behavior D, which is a more profitable one or a more engaging one, is higher. So looking at that really sort of in a data way and leveraging the assets and the tech infrastructure that they've built around that model is certainly something that I'm excited about and seeing a lot of uptake, now in the UK as well, especially with some of the things you guys are doing.
Yeah, I guess the European market's been interesting, and I guess a lot of the venues collectively, both sides of the fence, to an extent, have gone from what is spend per head in terms of how much am I worth to a club or a venue on a match day, through to actually what is that lifetime value? How do I look further ahead? Because I guess one of the challenges that many of the app projects kind of collectively and digital projects face is what's the ROI type question, and that's often a longer term play. As you say, it's behavior A, B, and C needs to be in place, and then you can get to kind of holy grail D.
Yeah.
I guess different sports are at different maturity levels in the European market on the understanding of that. As a piece, how are the different sports reacting in the US markets? Has there been notable differences between NFL and obviously the draft that you guys were heavily involved in versus NBA, for example?
Yeah, obviously, you know, with different league timings, COVID has affected differently. So, you know, obviously in the NBA and NHL, their seasons were cut short. The NBA and the NHL, yeah, and the NFL, you have almost, you know, fortunate timing in that a lot of this is happening outside of the season, with you know, the NFL season starting a few months from now. But I think one thing that you know has really happened during this time, and you know, you mentioned it with the draft, is that there are, you know, tentpole events or content opportunities that exist outside of you know, actual players playing. And I think there's been a prioritization on an emphasis on, you know, how do we take this, you know, long history and bank of historical content and repurpose that in creative ways to maintain engagement, to perhaps reactivate or activate for sponsors, commercial partners in when there's no physical world inventory in stadium.
Yeah.
And you know, and also kind of looking towards what we talk about as this sort of 365 engagement model. A lot of teams, I think, have been viewing the sports season not as, you know, 15 matches or 20 matches, but 365 days of content opportunities. And I think when you have that mindset, it's natural to think, well, we don't have people playing right now, but we have content strategy in place. You know, I think as you advance on the digital path, you know, certainly game day, match day, there's lots of content, and we all have our heads around that model. But what do we do on that quiet Tuesday, or that, you know, that day during July when nothing's going on? How do we maintain engagement? How do we maintain partner value? And I think the clubs that were in that mindset of 365, engaging in the off-peak non-match day games, have really done a good job of adapting to the content realities of the times.
Yeah, definitely. It's also been interesting from the UK market perspective. We've certainly seen really an acceleration of the direct-to-consumer model, and people wanting to know more about that and how they can own more of their own customers. But then I guess kind of also figured out that they don't necessarily know their own customers at the moment, because that model was so heavily, I know, yeah, Mike's a season ticket holder, Mike buys a beer, Mike bought a hot dog. Right, now what do we do? And people started to have that catalyst for the next step, because I guess that links back into the whole digital engagement piece of what content do we serve John versus which content do we serve Mike, to create this engagement, which then can drive that digital value and the frequency of that digital engagement. Because I guess definitely in the UK market, we're kind of talking about almost the second coming of mobile apps when we're talking to clients. When they first came in around, let's say, 2010, 2012 as the first wave, it was very much a carbon copy of the website. There wasn't any real value as to why I would use that on the train, on my way to work, or in my social time. Now we've got such a rich digital feature set, but the key is getting the right content to the right person at the right time. Would you guys go along with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like any tech adoption cycle, you know, early on, and you mentioned the sort of second coming of the app ecosystem, it's very much like a box check, right? Oh, well, it's an app, we need to have an app. People have apps, so let's do that check. And really, arguably the larger challenge and the bigger opportunity is not checking that box, but like you mentioned, what lies beyond? How do we take that and advance it further so it becomes a revenue source, not a cost center? How do we make it enhance the fan experience, not just be this piece of tech that exists? And I think those things are really part of you know, where the market's going with the app strategy. At the end of the day, you know, there's a whole host of different sources or places and ecosystems for digital inventory and digital experiences. And they each have their pros and cons. Obviously, social has reach. You know, that is a very powerful real-time way to connect with fans. But what it sort of lacks in comparison to the app ecosystem is that very strong data-rich environment, both in terms of data in and ability to activate on data out. So, when you have that app ecosystem, you can have an authenticated environment where your fan, to your point about your journey, and you can identify like this is a season ticket holder, they are a member and they prefer ABC, and therefore we can take that because the app is a data-rich sort of environment and segment and sort of activate on that, which is a little more difficult to do across some other channels. So the opportunity in the app, I think, is marrying that data-rich ecosystem that's a powerful asset owned by the club with the ability to activate, the ability to do something with it, which is, like you alluded to earlier, this notion of the so what of data. What do we do? What's the ROI? What's the action?
And obviously we sit here in COVID with venues closed and people turning to that. Are the learnings that people are getting at this stage, from your perspective, ones that they'll continue once venues are reopened? And you spoke about the match day content strategy. We're all familiar with that. We all understand how that works. Do you think that the content strategy we have at this moment in time and how people are using digital is actually going to continue and intertwine with match days as and when they eventually come back?
Yeah, I think I think that there will be kind of I mentioned it a bit earlier. There will be an increased emphasis on the off-peak or the shoulder content opportunities. So what do we do midweek? What do we do off-season? How do we maintain engagement? Because you don't want this scenario where you invest in sort of this app strategy and that app just goes dormant for 2 months a year or 3-4 days a week. You want to maintain that engagement. What we're seeing is certainly now is an emphasis on historical moments, tug on the heartstrings and the emotions of major times, plays, seasons in the club's history, to bring those to light, to engage fans on those themes. And I think that also lends itself well to partners as well, who want to be associated with, really heart, string tugging kind of moments in a club's history. So I think the rear view mirror of content is certainly a big opportunity that I think we'll see a lot more of. And I also think that, a lot of this, while we can think about unique and creative opportunities, a lot of this is really just kind of thinking about what's your brand voice, how does the club tell its story on social and other channels, and adapting to that to the unique opportunity that the app presents. You don't have to reinvent the content strategy or brand voice. You really just apply it to the channel and leverage what the app has that perhaps other channels don't.
Great. Well, John, just to finish us off, would you mind sharing sort of your top 3 tips for how people can use mobile apps during this COVID period and generate that engagement that they're perhaps looking for at this moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, there's both tactical and strategic, and I think on the strategic side, I mean, we all do recognize this, but it's important to emphasize that, in a world filled with less than bright and shiny news, the relationship with the club is one that can really spur optimism. And I think as, people in the sports industry, we almost have a responsibility to, warm the hearts and minds of fans who, are hungry for something, right? They're hungry for content. And that sets us up for success. We have that foundation with fans. And I think from there, tactically, there are a lot of easy ways to do that. I mean, one of the things we've seen a lot of success with is things like trivia. Using the platform, we see a lot of teams, engaging fans in that way. And I think also, it's important to look at other events that are going on. Obviously, again, in the case of the NFL draft, there's a lot of content there leading up to, during, and then post. What's the type of team we want to build? Who are the picks we made? And then a reflection, get to know those players, tell those stories. So what might be a 1 or 2 day event in the case of that draft can actually become, a 2-week content series as we sort of build up to the predicate of that, the actual event itself, and sort of some of the aftermath and digesting. So looking at any sort of event that you have pre, post, and during is a great way to expand the content opportunity of what might only be a one-day endeavor.
Great stuff. Well, John, thanks for joining us and sharing your insights, both from mobile apps in general and the Rover platform to the viewers at home. Thank you very much for watching. You've been watching a PTI Vodcast on the Insight series. Stay safe, and if you want to find out more about Rover, please head to PTISmarterVenues.com. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening to the PTI Smarter Venues podcast. Find out more about us at PTISmarterVenues.com.